February 1959. When rescue teams arrived at the store in the Ural Mountains, they found something that shouldn't exist. The tent had been cut open from the inside, with knives, by the very hands of those who slept in it. 9 of the Soviet Union's best university students had fled into the freezing night, leaving behind their equipment, their winter clothes, their boots. Some were barefoot, in temperatures of 30 degrees below zero. They would all die along the next kilometer. And when their bodies were found, well, that's when the mystery really began, because one of them had no tongue. Several showed radioactivity on their clothing, and the fractures on some bodies were comparable to those of a high-speed car accident in the middle of an empty mountain. No signs of external violence. The investigation concluded that they died from an imperative natural force. Nothing more. The case was closed and classified. More than 65 years later, nobody really knows what happened on the Mountain of the Dead, the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass. There are cases that defy all rational explanation, events where every answer generates 10 more questions, where the physical evidence exists, is documented, is undeniable, but it makes no sense. The Dyatlov Pass incident is one of those cases. It's not an urban legend. It's not an internet rumor. It's an official case investigated by the Soviet prosecutor's office, with forensic autopsies, photographs, documented testimonies, and government archives. And yet, it is inexplicable. Today, we're going to examine every piece of evidence. We're going to reconstruct exactly what happened in chronological order. We're going to explore every theory, from the most rational to the most unsettling. And in the end, you'll decide what to believe. Because in this case, the official version of events satisfies no one, not even the investigator who closed the case. Let's start from the beginning. January 1959. The Soviet Union is at the height of the Cold War. They have just launched Sputnik into space, defeating the Americans in the space race. Nikita Khrushchev leads the country. The world is divided, tense, and full of secrets. In the city of Sverdlovsk, now Ekaterinburg, there's a prestigious Polytechnic Institute. Its students are the elite, future engineers, scientists, builders of Soviet communism. And among them, there's a group of mountaineering enthusiasts. Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, a fifth-year radio engineering student. Serious, methodical, and experienced. He holds a Grade 3 mountaineering certification, the highest in the USSR. He is the natural leader of the group. Zinaida Kolmogorova, 22 years old. Everyone calls her Zina. She also studies radio engineering. She keeps the expedition's collective diary. Bright, responsible. Yuri Krivonischenko, 23 years old. Construction worker. He has an important detail in his story. 2 years earlier, in 1957, he worked on the cleanup of the KY-61 nuclear disaster, one of the worst nuclear accidents in history. Yuri Doroshenko, 21 years old, economic engineering student, close friend of Krivonischenko. Rustam Slobodin, 23 years old, engineer, athletic, strong. Ludmila Dubinina, 20 years old, the youngest of the group. She studies economics. Everyone knows her as Luda, enthusiastic, full of life. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, 23 years old. His French surname attracts attention in Soviet Russia. A recent graduate. Alexander Kolevatov, 24 years old. He has connections with the Moscow Institute of Physics and Engineering, linked to nuclear research. And finally, the most mysterious of the group, Semyon Zolotaryov, 37 years old, much older than the rest. World War II veteran, ski instructor. He joined the group at the last minute, replacing another participant. And there's a strange detail. He asked everyone to call him Sasha, short for Alexander, even though his real name was Semyon. Why? Director's note. Keep the question unanswered, it builds intrigue. Oh, and there was a 10th member, Yuri Yudin, 21 years old. This detail is crucial, because Yuri Yudin is the only one who survived, not by luck, not by skill, simply because days before it all happened, severe pain in his knees forced him to abandon the expedition and return home. He would live until 2013, 54 years old, carrying the burden of survivor's guilt, wondering what happened to his friends. But in January 1959, all that was yet to come. For now, they were just 10 young adventurers, preparing for the expedition of their lives. The route was ambitious. Category 3, the most difficult classification. 300 kilometers through the northern Ural Mountains in the dead of winter. The goal, to reach the summit of Mount Otorten at over 1,000 meters high. If they succeeded, they would earn a prestigious certification. More importantly, they would experience an unforgettable adventure. On January 23rd, the group departed from Sverdlovsk by train for Ivdel. They were in good spirits. The photographs show them smiling and joking. In their diaries, they wrote about the scenery, the cold, and small anecdotes from the journey. On January 25th, they arrived in Ivdel. From there, they take a truck to Vizhay, the last inhabited settlement to the north. From here on out, they are on their own. On January 28th, Yuri Yudin said goodbye to the group. His knee pain was unbearable. Years later, he would remember that moment as the one that saved his life. It is the last time he sees his friends alive. The other 9 continue north, towards a mountain that the native Mansi call Kholat, a name that people often translate as the Mountain of the Dead, but whose more accurate translation would be the Dead Mountain. The diaries allow us to follow every step. On January 31st, the weather worsens. Strong winds, reduced visibility, blizzard. In her diary, Kolmogorova writes, "The weather worsened overnight. Wind. The wind continued, and as a result, visibility became very poor. Under these conditions, they deviate from their route. Instead of continuing towards Otorten, they end up on the eastern slope of Kholat. Dyatlov makes a decision. They will not descend and lose the altitude they have gained. They will camp on the mountainside. It's an unusual decision. Experienced mountaineers avoid camping on exposed slopes. But Dyatlov is experienced. He must have his reasons. The last known photograph was taken at approximately 5 o'clock in the afternoon on February 1st, 1959. It shows a group setting up the tent on the hillside. They are all bundled up against the cold. They are working together, as they have been doing for days. It is the last image of them alive. That night, something happens. Something that makes 9 experienced mountaineers take knives and cut their own tent from the inside. Something that makes them flee into the icy darkness, leaving behind everything they need to survive. And none of them will live to tell the tale. We don't know the exact time. Sometime during the night of February 1st to 2nd, 1959, something terrified the hikers. The tent is closed against the extreme cold. Inside, the 9 sleep or rest, protected by their sleeping bags and winter clothing. Then something happens. It's not a sound we hear. It's not a light we see. It's something that causes everyone simultaneously to absolutely panic. They don't open the entrance. There's no time. They take knives and slash the fabric. Long cuts, almost a meter long. Enough to force their way out. And they flee, without their coats, without their boots, some in socks, some barefoot, at temperatures of minus 30 degrees Celsius. They descend the slope towards a forest, approximately 1.5 kilometers. The footprints they leave in the snow will be found weeks later. And those footprints tell a strange story, because these aren't footprints of people running in blind panic. They're footprints of people walking, in a line, at a relatively normal pace. Extreme panic enough to leave the store half naked. But calm enough to walk in formation? Something doesn't add up. The footprints continue for 500 meters before being covered by snow. After that, we don't know exactly how they moved, but we know where they ended up. The first 2 reached the edge of the forest, a large cedar tree. Under its branches, they try to light a fire. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonischenko. They succeed. They light a small fire. They break off branches of the cedar, some up to 5 meters high. To stoke the fire? To see something? To escape from something? We don't know. But it's not enough. Both died of hypothermia, wearing only underwear. Their bodies showed burns on their hands and feet. Krivonischenko had something disturbing. He had bitten off a piece of his own knuckle. Was he trying to stay awake? Was he stifling a scream? Meanwhile, 3 members of the group try to return to the store. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Rustam Slobodin. They collapse one after another, at intervals of hundreds of meters. Dyatlov falls within 300 meters of the cedar. Kolmogorova within 630 meters. Slobodin within 480, all facing the tent, as if they had been crawling back, desperately trying to reach shelter. But they never succeed. All 5 died of hypothermia. That's the official diagnosis. Frozen to death in the Ural Mountains night. If the story ended here, it would be a tragedy. A terrible accident. Mountaineers who made a fatal mistake and paid the ultimate price. But the story doesn't end here, because 4 bodies are still missing. And when they meet, 3 months later, everything will change. The group was due to return around February 12th. Dyatlov had said they might take longer, so initially there was no alarm. But when a week goes by without news, the families demand action. On February 20th, search teams were sent out. Students, teachers, volunteers. Everyone knew someone in the group. The Urals in February are unforgiving. Deep snow, winds that freeze exposed skin in minutes. Near zero visibility. But they continue searching. On February 26th, a student named Mikhail Sherevin finds something. The store, partially buried in snow. And as they approach, they see the cuts from the inside. The equipment is there. The food, a half-eaten plate of food, an unopened bottle of vodka, winter clothes, boots, everything abandoned. They follow the footprints towards a forest. On February 27th, the first bodies were found. Doroshenko and Krivonischenko were found under the cedar tree. That same day, Dyatlov and Kolmogorova were found on the hillside. The next day, March 5th, Slobodin. 5 bodies. 5 funerals. The city is in mourning. The country is shocked. But the search continues, because 4 are still missing. March passes. April passes. The snow begins to melt. And then, on May 5th, 1959, almost 3 months after the incident, a Monsey native with his dog finds something in a ravine 75 meters beyond the cedar tree, under 2 to 3 meters of snow, in a makeshift shelter built with fir branches. They're the last 4: Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol. And this is where the case becomes truly inexplicable. Dr. Boris Vozros-Denny performs the autopsies. He is an experienced forensic pathologist. He has seen bodies in all kinds of conditions. But these bodies, these are different. Pause. Let's start with Lyudmila Dubinina. Fractured ribs, multiple, bilateral, massive internal hemorrhage in the right ventricle of the heart. But that's not the most disturbing thing. It's missing its tongue, completely, torn out at the root. He is missing both eyes. He is missing part of his upper lip. Zolotaryov, fractured ribs, both eyes missing. Thibault-Brignol, severely fractured skull, sunken. Kolevatov, deformed neck, absent eyebrows. But here's the crucial point. There are almost no external injuries. The skin is mostly intact. Dr. Vozros-Denny writes in his report, the force capable of causing such fractures is comparable to that of a high-speed car accident. In the middle of an empty mountain, no vehicles, no falls from heights, no signs of a struggle. What force can fracture ribs and skulls without damaging the skin? And there's another detail, one that the Soviet government didn't want anyone to know. On May 27, 1959, a scientist named Levashev analyzed the clothing of some hikers. The results are abnormal. Kolevatov's clothes, 5,600 beta particles per minute before washing. Dubinina's clothes, 9,900 beta particles per minute. For context, the limit for workers handling radioactive substances was 5,000 particles per minute. Levashev confirms in his report that these levels cannot be obtained under natural conditions. Now, there are possible explanations. Krivonischenko worked on the cleanup of Mayak in 1957. Camping lamps of that era used radioactive thorium wicks. But is that enough to explain these levels? 2 years later? And here's the most disturbing part. One day after this radioactivity report, on May 28, 1959, the case was abruptly closed. The official conclusion: the hikers died due to an imperative natural force. That's all. An imperative natural force. Without specifying which force. Without blaming anyone. Without a detailed explanation. The files are classified. They are being sent to a secret archive. Public discussion of the case is prohibited. And for 31 years, the mystery remains buried. Until 1990. In 1990, 31 years after the case was closed, researcher Lev Ivanov published an article. And he does something extraordinary. He admits that they had no explanation. I came to the conclusion that the hikers died due to an impact from something unknown. The causes of death were unknown to us. But it says more. Much more. Ivanov reveals that during the investigation, multiple witnesses reported seeing bright orange spheres in the sky on the night of the incident. Local residents, geologists, members of the search teams. Ivanov says that when he brought a Geiger counter to the camp, it went crazy. The readings were extremely high. And then he received a direct order from his superiors: discard all testimonies about the spheres. Close the case. Immediately, the party leadership demanded that I classify these materials and exclude them from the case, under threat of serious consequences for my career. So, what are we seeing here? A cover-up? Of what? Very well. We have all the facts on the table. Now the question is, what explains them? Let's begin with natural, rational theories. Theory number 1, Avalanche. This is the official explanation from the Russian government in 2020. They argue that the hikers cut into the slope to pitch their tent, destabilizing the snow. Extreme winds accumulated more snow overnight. Hours later, a delayed avalanche occurred. In fact, a Swiss study published in the journal Nature in 2021 used computer simulations to show that this is physically possible. Sounds convincing, right? But there are problems. First, rescue teams reported no signs of an avalanche at the site. The tent was partially buried, yes, but not destroyed. The footprints were preserved for 500 meters. Second, if there was enough panic to cut the tent, why wasn't there panic in the footprints? They were walking with relative calm. Third, how does an avalanche explain radioactivity? Fourth, the last 4 bodies were in the woods 75 meters beyond the cedar tree, far from any avalanche zone. The avalanche theory explains some things, but it leaves many loose ends. Theory number 2, infrasound, proposed by journalist Donnie Icar in 2013. Katabatic winds descending the mountain can create sound frequencies below 20 hertz. Infrasound, inaudible to humans. But infrasound can cause physical effects: extreme anxiety, panic, nausea, a feeling of presence, even hallucinations. This would explain the irrational panic without a visible threat. It would explain why they fled without getting dressed. The mountain itself was generating a frequency that terrified them on a visceral level. It's a fascinating theory. Elegant, based on real science. But it does not explain massive trauma. It does not explain radioactivity. It does not explain missing soft tissues. Okay, if it wasn't completely natural, was it human? Theory number 3, Soviet military test. The Urals were not empty. There were military installations, nuclear bases. The USSR was conducting R-7 missile tests in the region. In fact, there are records of R-7 launches on February 17, 1959. Not on February 1st or 2nd, but close to it. And these missiles produce orange luminous trails, exactly like the reported spheres. Could the group have been the victim of a test gone wrong? An out-of-control missile? A thermobaric bomb? Something experimental? That would explain the immediate cover-up, file classification, the orders to silence testimonies, radioactivity, possibly trauma, pressure waves. It's a compelling theory, especially considering the context of the Cold War and Soviet secrecy. But it's not perfect either. Why test weapons so close to civilians? Where's the direct evidence of a test on that specific night? And now we come to the theory that many do not want to consider, but that they also cannot completely rule out, the extraterrestrial theory. I know what you're thinking. It sounds sensationalist. It sounds like science fiction. But listen to the evidence. 1. Multiple independent, credible witnesses reported luminous spheres at night. Not one, not two, multiple. And their descriptions coincide. Bright, orange spheres, moving in a controlled manner across the sky. 2. The lead researcher confirmed this 3 decades later. He had no reason to lie in 1990. 3. Radioactivity without a satisfactory explanation. 4. Sudden panic without a visible rational threat. 5. The explicit orders to cover up the testimonies about the spheres. If they were just missiles or normal atmosphere phenomena, why censor them? I'm not saying it was an alien. I have no proof of that. But what I am saying is that there are elements in this case that don't fit any conventional explanation. And those elements were actively suppressed by the authorities. Encounter with unidentified technology, unknown atmosphere phenomenon, classified military experiment, a combination of factors? Don't know, and that's the honest answer. Because here's the inconvenient truth. No single theory explains everything. The avalanche does not explain why they were walking calmly, nor does the radioactivity. Infrasound does not explain massive trauma or missing tissue. The military test does not explain why some tried to return calmly, nor the specific pattern of the deaths. The extraterrestrial theory, well, it's speculation without direct physical evidence. And then there are the details that simply don't make sense in any scenario. Why did the last 4 of them exchange clothes? Dubinina was wearing Zolotaryov's coat. Zolotaryov was wearing Dubinina's coat. Why? If 4 were by the fire, obviously alive, why didn't they help the 3 who were trying to get back to the tent? How did Dubinina lose her tongue from the root? The official explanation is decomposition in water, but it was frozen under meters of snow for 3 months. Why did they break off branches of a cedar tree up to 5 meters high? What were they trying to see? Or what were they trying to escape from? Each answer generates new questions. In 2019, 60 years after the incident, public pressure finally forced the Russian government to reopen the case. New expeditions, new forensic analyses, modern technology. Prosecutor Andrei Kuryakov led the investigation. In July 2020, he announced his conclusion, a 2-stage snow slab avalanche. The victims' families rejected the explanation. Independent investigators criticized it. The international community questioned it, because once again, it leaves too many questions unanswered. The 2021 Swiss study attempted to give scientific rigor to the avalanche theory. And yes, they proved it's possible, physically possible. But as the authors themselves admitted, we do not claim to have solved the mystery of Dyatlov Pass, as no one survived to tell the tale. Scientific honesty, admitting the limits of knowledge. I wish more researchers would do the same. Today, the site is officially known as Dyatlov Pass. There is a monument there with the names of the 9 victims. Hundreds of hikers visit it every year, some seeking adventure, others answers. But it's easy to forget, amid the mystery and theories, that these were real people. Igor, who dreamed of being an engineer. Zina, who meticulously kept her diary. Luda, only 20 years old, full of life. The 2 Yuris, inseparable friends. Rustam, the athlete. Nikolai with his French surname. Kolevatov, the scientist. And Zolotaryov, the mysterious one, the war veteran who had survived so much, only to die on a frozen mountain. 9 futures. 9 shattered families. 65 years of unanswered questions. Yuri Yudin, the survivor, lived until 2013. 54 years after saying goodbye to his friends. In an interview shortly before he died, he said, "If there were a God, I would thank him on my knees for not having been there that night." But he also said that he never had an explanation, that it haunted him his whole life. He died without knowing what happened to his friends. So, what does the Dyatlov Pass tell us? Perhaps it tells us that the world still holds real mysteries. Not everything can be explained, categorized, or filed away. We live in an age where we believe we have answers for everything. Google is just a click away. Science has explained so much. The world seems completely mapped, understood, and then we find a case like this. Solid physical evidence, comprehensive documentation, multiple official investigations, modern technology. And yet we don't know. Perhaps we don't need to know. Perhaps the value of cases like Dyatlov Pass lies not in solving them, but in reminding us that they exist, that there are limits to our knowledge, that reality is stranger and more complex than we care to admit. Or perhaps we do need to know, out of respect for them, for the 9 young people who died in circumstances that defy all explanation. Was it a delayed avalanche, a terrible series of wrong decisions under hypothermia? Was it a Soviet military test gone catastrophically wrong? Was it an unknown natural phenomenon, infrasound, or something science doesn't yet understand? Or was it something else? Something the authorities decided was best left buried? I don't have the answer. 65 years of research don't either. But I have an opinion. Anyone who can tell you with absolute certainty what happened at Dyatlov Pass that night, he probably hasn't examined all the evidence. The Dyatlov Pass incident is still being actively investigated. New expeditions every year, new analyses, new theories. The Dyatlov Foundation keeps the archives alive. The families continue to search for answers. And thousands of people around the world remain fascinated by this case, because it represents something fundamental, genuine mystery in a world that pretends not to have any. Now I ask you, what do you think happened? Avalanche? Military experiment? Unexplained phenomenon? Leave it in the comments. I love reading theories and debating evidence. If this case fascinated you as much as it did me, I recommend you investigate it yourself. The archives are available online. The original photographs, the diaries, the autopsy reports, it's all there. Link in the description to the Dyatlov Foundation and the best sources. And if you want more cases like this, real, well-documented mysteries, consider subscribing. Every week we explore a new case that defies explanation. Leave a like if this video made you think. Share it if you think someone else should know this story. And remember, the world is stranger than we think. Sometimes much stranger. See you in the next mystery.